You can start now, Dinesh.
Yes, sir. You are live. You can start, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Dr. Dev, please.
So can I start now?
Yeah. You can start.
Is it online live now?
Yes, sir. You are online.
Okay.
But I cannot see here in my other laptop. Okay, now, Dr. Dev, please start again. Sorry to interrupt you. It is
না
live,
ঠিক আছে
it is live now. Okay.
ঠিক আছে তাহলে আমি স্টার্ট করছি হ্যাঁ
Yeah.
Okay, 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 sir.
okay so let's look at how COVID-19 started its journey around the world. It's all started on December 1st in Wuhan in China when a first known virus patient developed some symptoms. At that time, it was not known what is the virus actually. By December 31st, there were some more cases, and China informed the WHO that a cluster of cases of pneumonia of an unknown cause are appearing in Wuhan city in the province of Hubei. After about 10-12 days, a team of scientists in Shanghai, they could sequence the complete genome of the virus from some of these patients. And that led to identification of this virus, and also that paved the way of developing diagnostic kits based on this genomic sequence. Then gradually, many other countries like Thailand, Japan, and other parts of China, they started reporting cases. And finally, after 2 months, on January 30th, the WHO declared the epidemic a global health emergency because it started appearing in other countries as well. However, till that time, WHO did not declare it a pandemic. Now, in February, by middle of February, the epicenter of the epidemic started shifting towards Europe. On February 14th, France recorded Europe's first death from this virus, and the whole Europe soon started recording many new cases daily, and surprisingly at a volume that was reported by China even at its peak. Then by end of February, many other European countries and even the US also started reporting similar cases and also deaths. Then WHO declared officially this as a pandemic on March 11th. After 2 days, the US declared national emergency, at which time the case tally in the US surpassed the tally of Hubei province of China. India ordered nationwide lockdown on March 24, which later extended, as we know, in 2 phases till May 17. So this is in brief how the COVID-19 spread all over the world within a span of about 3.5 months. Now let's look what happened in India. In India, the first case was detected after WHO announced a global health emergency. If you see that on December 1st, on the right side of the table, on December 1st, the first case was reported in Wuhan, and on January 30th, WHO declared a global health emergency. And on 31st January, the first case was reported in India from Kerala. Then until the end of February, there was not significant increase in number of cases. Only 3 cases are there, all from Kerala, and no one died. Then gradually from March, more number of cases started appearing in India, and very soon on 3rd May, that means by the end of last week, it crossed 40,000 mark, and we know now that by now it is touching the 60,000 mark. So even when, if you see that even when WHO declared a pandemic, the number of cases in India, reported cases in India, was very low, only less than 84. It was less than 84, and the global number of cases was more than 100,000 by that time, with almost 4,000 deaths. So India started very late in getting COVID-19 cases. But there is one or more interesting patterns in the Indian scenario. Like first, let's look at the death rates. If you look at the death rates, when it started appearing in India, this is weekly death rates. So on 14th March, it started with 2.4. By last week, May 3rd, it was 3.2. And it didn't vary too much from the very beginning till 3rd May. It didn't vary too much. Whereas, if you look at the global scenario, it started again like India, 2.2. But if you look at May 3, when India's figure was 3.2, it was more than double, 7% deaths. So what does it mean, and is there any implication? Okay, so let's just think about 2 scenarios. The global death rates, why it increased? Maybe that more number of older cases as newer countries were affected, especially the European countries. And as it affected more older cases, which are more prone to have serious disease and more prone to death, so it could explain in this way, that because of their involvement in gradually more in number, so the death rate also increased. If this is the case, then in future, the Indian scenario may not change much over time, because our population do not have that many or older people. So we can expect that the death rate will remain quite similar to what we are seeing now. But if this is the other scenario, like it could be due to lack of available resources to manage growing number of cases. I mean, globally, when many cases started appearing every day, then probably there was scarcity of resources to manage this growing number of patients, resulting in many deaths. So if this is the situation, then Indian figures may increase with time in future, because we are seeing more and more number of cases day by day, and our resources are also limited. So after a certain time, the death rate may increase. So this is the implication. So we'll see what will happen in future, probably in next 1 or 2 weeks. the death scenarios actually varied in different parts of the world. Like in Brazil, Russia, Mexico, and Peru, the death rates are increasing gradually. Then we don't know the exact reason, but it could probably because of addition of more number of cases and again the limited resources. Whereas in the European countries which are worst hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, they have already passed through the peak of deaths. If we look at the graphs of Italy, UK, Spain, France, Belgium, Germany, in all of them, we are seeing a declining trend of death rates in these countries. Okay, so number of cases are also declining. That's true. So manageability is much more, and it may also happen, we don't know yet, that it is possible that many of the older people are already affected. So not many of the older people are getting newly affected and contributing to this. So we are seeing a declining pattern. So for India, we have to wait for next 1 or 2 weeks to see which way we are going. So these are for deaths. How about the cases in India? The occurrence of cases in India, if we look at weekly number of cases since March 9, when the cases started appearing in a substantial number. So the upper graph shows that gradually the number of cases increased. I mean, quite substantial. But if we look in the lower graph, which deals with percentage increase in number of cases from the previous week, then in the first part until, I mean, from 9th March, say till 6th of April, we see that from the previous week, the number of cases jumped to 2, 3, or 1.5 times. I mean, 152% or 300% like that. But after 6th April, it gradually came down. By 3rd May, I mean, the week of 3rd May compared to the previous week had only like 50% increase in number of cases. So if we compare this number of cases from the previous week and how it increased, the percentage increase, we can see a gradual declining trend. However, we must be very cautious here because these reported numbers doesn't say everything. They also, I mean, depend on how many people got tested during this time. Because we know that during the first half, initially, the number of testing labs also increased over the country. Their testing capacity was increased, and the country started testing more and more people. So it could be due to simply due to the increased number of testing that more and more people got detected. So let's look from other angle. Total samples positive among total sample tested. So percentage, this graph shows the percentage positivity among the total number of samples tested. So if we look at the graph, and I have fitted a polynomial trend line into this graph, which fits very well. If you look at the R square value, it's 0.96. So it fits very well. So this trend shows that initially, actually it increased. I mean, if we take into account the number of people who got tested, so the percentage positivity did increase during the first half, but around middle of April, it was almost stabilized, right? So there is almost a stable trend. And let's look at what happened during this period in India in terms of preventive efforts, mainly the lockdown. So if we superimpose those lockdown efforts within this graph, if you see that WHO declared pandemic on 11th March in the beginning of this epidemic in India, and India declared COVID-19 a notified disaster on 14th March. Then the national lockdown phase 1 started on 24th March. Still, after the lockdown, the percentage of cases started, increased. And it is expected, it is not unexpected, because even before lockdown, there were many cases who came from abroad, and there were mixing of people with these cases. So they took some time to be detected as positives, right? So they could take something between 1 and 3 weeks. So it is not surprising that we could see a rising trend, even though the lockdown was implemented on 24th March. Now, if we look at the national lockdown phase 2, which started around 15th April, middle of April, after that, the percentage positivity almost stabilized, right? And the third phase of lockdown was announced on 3rd May to be continued at present till 17th of May. But there is a catch, because this phase 3 encompasses also many kinds of relaxations, right? So we don't know yet what will be the effect of those relaxations. Because I was here, I put data only until 5th of May. Although it seems that there is a rising trend, but we should not read too much into it. But the last few days data actually is not very encouraging. It may be showing some increasing trend, but till we get a clear increasing trend, we have to wait for at least another 7-10 days to see the effect of this relaxed lockdown phase. So let's wait until 1 more week. Now, we know that there are different stages of this COVID-19 epidemic. Probably, the data, all the data, they indicate that probably we are currently in stage 3. The community transmission have started in maybe initially in some pockets, not spread widely into the population, but at least in some pockets, we have indications that some community transmission is going on. So maybe beginning of stage 3, and we have to see that whether those relaxations within this lockdown phase can check or can aggravate this community transmission further. the main purpose of lockdown, of course, is not preventing occurrence of cases at all, but to prevent the number of cases occurring at a time, so that the healthcare system gets time to cope up with the occurrence of cases, to manage those cases. Probably in any case, the total number of cases ultimately will be very similar, even with what would happen without lockdown. But without lockdown, the cases would appear as a sharp peak, which could be unmanageable by our healthcare resources. So, if the lockdown is implemented very efficiently, then the healthcare system will not have that much burden and probably will be able to manage the cases efficiently, and thereby reducing the number of severe cases and deaths ultimately. Now, talking about the next part, the COVID-19 and the ENT surgeons. Okay, we know that two most common modes of COVID-19 transmissions are through droplet infections and through contact with contaminated surfaces or objects. We also know by now that COVID-19 virus particles, they reside in extremely high concentration in the nasal cavity and nasopharynx, and can be a significant source of transmission. And we by now have evidence to suggest that viral load in the nose and nasopharynx of asymptomatic carriers are as high as those with symptoms. So that means that asymptomatic carriers are also as efficient as the symptomatic counterparts in transmitting the infection to other susceptible persons. Worldwide, ENT surgeons are one of the highest risk healthcare providers. We have evidence from many countries like China, Italy, Iran, and also other countries that otolaryngologists are among the highest risk. The first death of a doctor from COVID-19 was an ENT surgeon in Wuhan in China. The otolaryngologists are especially vulnerable because they come direct because of direct transmission through mucus, blood, and aerosolized particles when they examine or operate the patients. Now, there is one thing added, that is one announcement or one directive by the Ministry of Health and Welfare, Family Welfare of Government of India by mid of April, that asked all the states and union territories to seek services of ENT specialists, saying that there was an urgent need of qualified personnel to collect samples, which are usually throat swabs for COVID-19 testing. So that means that again, by the directive, I mean, they come across the many different high-risk situations in their usual practice, but even through this directive, they will face high-risk scenarios in many places. So all of us know that avoidance of transmission is the key. Since we do not have any effective vaccine developed by now. So the only way to prevent or the transmission of this virus has been isolation or quarantine and physical distancing and other standard precautions like frequent hand washing and not traveling in public transport or other vehicles unnecessarily, avoid crowding, putting on face mask, staying at home, all these things. So we are all aware about all these things by now. So for ENT surgeons specifically, they need to identify the high-risk procedures that they can come across in their practice. These are mostly the aerosol generating procedures, and you people know better than me that what are these procedures, like examination of upper aerodigestive tract, operative procedures on these tracts, and some interventional procedures even in the outpatient departments, some emergency care. So this aerosol generating has been identified as very high risk procedures, and there are guidance from many governments across the country how to deal with patients of various risk categories in day-to-day practice of the ENT surgeons. So in general, what they suggest that first to assess the risk of the patient, simply based on their history and examination, like if they have some suggestive signs and symptoms, if they have any history of contact with positive COVID-19 case, any suggestive travel history, etc. So they can categorize patient as with low risk or high risk and can take precautions accordingly. Then anosmia is now established as a marker of COVID-19 infection. Even many doctors have identified isolated anosmia in patients of COVID-19 infection without any other symptoms, at least in the initial stage. The problem is that in many circumstances, the ENT surgeons, when they come across patients with some complaints, they would not know what is the actual status of COVID-19 for this patient. The suggestion is that whenever they need to come into close contact of such patients or handling such patients, and they do not know the COVID-19 status of such patients, they should handle it as if this patient is COVID-19 positive to safeguard themselves. After assessing the patient based on the patient's complaint, the next step is to assess the risk of the recommended procedure, usually recommended procedure, and whether they can modify those procedures as per the risk. For example, they can think about delaying the procedure if not an urgent need. They can choose some alternatives if they have. They may think about modifying the surgical approaches or may use a different technique or tool so that aerosolization is reduced and the overall risk is reduced. In general, it is said that all the elective and non-urgent surgery should be postponed. Even people think about some innovative remote care approaches wherever possible, like whether the patients can be manageable through telephonic consultation or by utilizing some telemedicine services. Now, okay, so there are some specific suggestions also from some of the ministries of different countries, like the equipment that will be used should be cleaned appropriately with proper disinfectants, and special considerations to be made for endoscopic examinations, and endoscopic exams should be done only if urgently necessary, otherwise it should be avoided. And because there is a concern of aerosolized particles, nebulizers and atomizers are strongly discouraged if possible at all. Now, we have one guidelines from our Ministry of Health and Family Welfare of Government of India. And this guideline is about outpatient clinics in non-COVID hospitals or non-COVID treatment areas like personal physician's clinic or doctor's chamber. So the kind of personal protective equipments that has to be used based on the risk profile of the situation and setting. So the guideline says that if the clinical setting involves the registration area or help desk of a non-COVID hospital or a clinic, the risk is only mild, and the recommended PPE is triple layer medical mask and latest examination gloves. And they also suggest that physical distancing should be followed at all times. Other than ENT or dental or ophthalmology doctor's chamber, for other doctor's chamber, for clinical management, they also consider it to be of mild risk, and similar suggestions are made for PPE, and they say that no aerosol generating procedure should be allowed in those settings. Now, specifically for the chambers of ENT or dental or ophthalmology doctors, for clinical management in these clinics, the government is saying that this involves moderate risk and it requires N95 mask, goggles, latex examination gloves. And because here aerosol generating procedures are expected. They also suggest, in addition, to use a face shield whenever a splash of body fluid is expected. So this is from our Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, but there are also guidance about handling inpatients or operative patients from many other ministries of other countries. This is a summarized scheme. It says that it categorizes first whether it involves an aerosol generating procedure. If no, then the clinician or ENT surgeon should assess the patient's risk, and the risks will be assessed by knowing these things, whether the patient is symptomatic or not, was there a likely exposure of a positive COVID-19 subject, and whether COVID-19 tests have been conducted on this particular patient or not. So the patient or the scenario will be of low risk category if the patient is asymptomatic, there is no history of direct exposure to a COVID-19 positive patient, and this patient itself is COVID-19 negative. Then they suggest level 1 personal protective equipments to be used. it will be of high risk category if the patient is symptomatic, if there is a known exposure, and if this patient is COVID-19 positive, then level 2 PPE should be used. And known exposure to a COVID-19 positive patient, then level 2 PPE should be used. Now, if the procedure is expected to generate aerosol, then the ENT surgeon should obtain COVID-19 testing if the clinical urgency allows. Now, if COVID-19 is negative, or if due to the clinical urgency the status is unknown and there is very low suspicion that the patient may have COVID-19, then level 2 PP is suggested. Whereas if the patient is tested COVID-19 positive, or if not tested, but so that the status is unknown, but there is a strong suspicion of being COVID-19 positive, then level 3 PP is suggested. So let's see what are the PPEs suggested at these various levels. So in level 1, surgical mask, isolation gown, gloves, and eye protection, these are suggested. For level 2, N95 respirator, disposable fluid repellent gown, gloves, eye protection, that means using face shield or goggles. In addition, head cover may also be considered, and double gloves. Use of double gloves may also be considered. Level 3 PPE incorporates negative pressure room, minimum number personnel, PA peer if available, or double disposable fluid repellent gown, head cover including neck, double gloves, N99 or even N95 mask with second surgical mask and attached face shield or goggles. So these are the different level of PPEs for different settings or different scenarios of risk categories. Now, if a patient is admitted for some intervention, clinical intervention, there must be some precautions observed so that transmission from the patient doesn't occur to the surgeon or other associated staff. So there are 3 different kinds of precautions or 3 different levels of precautions taken. The first one, the milder one, is contact precaution. It is to prevent transmission of infectious agents by direct or indirect contact with the patient. And these contact precautions should be taken in presence of excessive wound drainage, fecal incontinence, or other discharges. So the precautions include keeping the patient in a private room, a clean, non-sterile gloves to be used by the surgeon when entering the room and to be removed before exit, clean, non-sterile gown to be worn before entering the room if substantial contact is anticipated. Now, patients should be transported only for emergency or essential purpose. Otherwise, patients should not be transported. And if possible, in all the non-critical care equipment should not be shared among other patients. So these are the contact precautions that should be observed to avoid transmission of infectious agent from the patient through contacts. The next one, which is very pertinent to COVID situation, which is droplet precautions to prevent transmission of infectious agents that are spread by droplets more than 5 micron diameter. So the precautions include keeping the patient in a private room, special airflow is not needed, and doors may remain open. Use of surgical or isolation mask if working within 3 feet of the patient. Use of droplet mask on the patient whenever the patient is leaving room, if it is tolerated by the patient, of course. Then transporting patient only for essential purposes. Respiratory and hygiene should be followed, and cough etiquette should be observed, and gown and gloves as per the standard precautions. The highest level of precautions to be observed is for airborne precautions. It is to prevent transmission of infectious agents that are spread by airborne droplets which are less than 5 micron diameter. Because these droplets remain infectious for a long period of time and can travel over a long distance. So these precautions include private room with monitored negative pressure ventilation for such patients, discharge of room air to outside or HEPA filtered before recirculation. Doors and windows must be kept closed at all times. Observing respiratory protection, usually through using N95 mask, and droplet mask to be used on the patient whenever the patient is leaving room, and patient is to be transported only for essential purposes. So these are the in general the summarized things that the ENT surgeons must be aware of in their day-to-day practice in the clinical or hospital settings in dealing with outpatients or inpatients or operative patients. So I guess that there will be time in future when we can probably expect a surge of patients in general in the near future, but we don't know yet the magnitude of this. So if these basic things, basic nature about this COVID-19 pandemic, the basic characteristics of the virus, its transmission, its prevention aspect, and all these things are kept in mind, as well as the kind of precautions that ENT surgeons should take at various scenarios. I think they can keep themselves safe and healthy in this tough time. So until we have an effective vaccine developed for this particular virus, or many people are also working on finding out effective medications against this virus. Many of these have been tried, sometimes failed, but some of these medications are also showing promising results and approved for use in COVID-19 patients. So let's hope that very soon we'll have medications as well as some good vaccine in our hand to tackle with this public health menace. And till then, I wish all of you have to be safe and healthy. So the message is stay safe, stop COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alok, for your wonderful and informative lecture. Sir, we are all very anxious about what is waiting for us in future. There is not only fear of infection, but also economic and mental stress. And you have given almost all the answers in your lecture. I believe that our members are benefited from this oration. As it is on digital platform, we cannot honor you with medal and certificate at present. We will do it as soon as lockdown ends. I will read out the felicitation certificate now. I am sharing the screen for everyone. The Association of Otolaryngologists of India, West Bengal, felicitate to Dr. Alok Kumar Dev. We, the members of the Association of Otolaryngologists of India, West Bengal, feel proud to felicitate Dr. Alok Kumar Dev, Scientist, Deputy Director, Senior Grade, Epidemiology Division, ICMR, Kolkata, for his participation as guest orator at Srimati Rashmani Mukhopadhyay Memorial Oration, held on Saturday, 9th May 2020 at 7 p.m. through webinar on topic the epidemiological trend of this COVID-19 pandemic and the role of ENT surgeon.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
we are extremely sorry for the interruption in transmission. We have recorded the oration and we will upload the recording on AYWB YouTube page, YouTube channel for the audiences. I thank all of you for participating in today's program. And I also announce that our next academic program is monthly clinical meeting, and that will be held on 16th May 2020, that is next Saturday. I also thank Lupin Respira for sponsoring today's meeting, and I request Mr. Ovijit Mondol, Lupin representative, to say a few words.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving me the chance and honor. And to all our respective dignitaries and to all doctors, very good evening to all of you. I pay my regards to all of you. I am Avijit Mondol, Regional Head of Lupin Respira Division. It is a great honor for us as a company, Lupin Respira, to be associated with the Association of Otolaryngology of India, and particularly with the committee of the West Bengals. And in this current pandemic scenario, we are really salute you for doing the noble work as a superhero. We Lupin Respira always stands with the doctors and ready to serve you more better way in coming future. It was a really great session, and Dr. Dev really wonderful, and it's a great talk by enriching the COVID emergencies. And we are really thankful to Dr. Banerjee, Dr. Burman, and Dr. Mukherjee, and to all members for arranging this prestigious oration. Today, we are privileged to have an opportunity to inform you about our one new launch. In allergic rhinitis portfolio, we have already our Telecastel. Along with that, we are strengthening our AR portfolio by launching Bilagra M, that is Bilastine and Montelukast combination. We are honored and thanking you for your commitment and respect your care about us. Please take care of yourself and take care of your loved ones, and stay healthy and stay safe. Thank you so much for giving this honor.
Sir, there
Thank
are
you.
few questions.
Yeah. Oration, we usually don't take any questions, but we have the members have already sent many questions for you, Dr.
Snehashish,
Yeah.
Snehashish, for Rashmani Mukhopadhyay Memorial Oration, there is no scope of taking questions.
Yeah. There is no scope. Now, I think that we can ask Dr. Alok Dev, and the answers will be sent to at a posted we'll post it in our group. We can do it.
Yes,
now
Dr. Burman, you can do one. Excuse me. You can do one thing. You can take the questions, collect the questions. You can send to me by mail, and I can send back you the responses.
Thank you, sir, for so nice gesture. Now, I request Dr. Dopan Mukherjee to say a few words.
Thank you, Dr. Dev. It was a wonderful experience for all of us. And most likely, we are among the people, those who are attending serial webinars in last 1.5 months. And I think today's oration is the most enriching one and very much helpful to all the ENT colleagues across the state. And I will love to have a follow-up webinar after 1 month. Okay, that may not be named after Rashmani Mukhopadhyay Memorial Oration. And in that webinar, we can discuss the recent scenario after 1 month, and we can take all the questions in that forum. I think that will be wonderful for our association. And I want to share another information to you for Dr. Dev. For across the state, from AY West Bengal, we have distributed up to the level 2 PPE to all our members free of cost from the AY West Bengal. So that's
wonderful. Wonderful.
And the PPE, face shield, then hand sanitizer, FFP2 mask, and all these things. And most likely we can reach up to North Bengal within a week.
Okay.
And again, I want to give thanks to all the executive committee members, our president Shubhajit Banerjee and Snehashish Burman for arranging this nice Rashmani Mukhopadhyay Memorial Oration, and also like to thank Lupin Respira for their technological support. Thank you.
Now, I request Dr. Shubhajit Banerjee. Is he disconnected? Oh. So,
So might be he's
Banerjee
disconnected. Dr. Banerjee
is disconnected. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then we now conclude our today's meeting. Again, I thank Dr. Alok Dev for giving time for this meeting, and also I thank that audiences for participating in today's program, and I thank Lupin for extending their supporting hand.
Thank you so much, sir. We are always with you.
Thank you so much.
Big clap for Dr. Dev.
Absolutely.
From all
Thank
of
you.
us. From all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
Okay, so we are concluding the meeting.
Sure. Thank you.
Bye, sir.
Bye.